All right, everyone. It looks like it's the witching hour here at 9 a.m. Hey, Matt, why don't you tell everybody what they've won this morning?
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Just a few quick things as normal. We are recording this morning, so you will have access to the presentation on our YouTube channel and website after we finish. If you have any troubleshooting issues or technical issues, please put those questions into the chat, and I will do my best to help you through those. If you have any questions for Alice as the presentation goes along, please put those into the chat or raise your hand as well down at the bottom of your screen, and I will prompt Alice as needed. If you can all remain muted throughout the call so there's no background noise, that would be wonderful. And there's one button I'd like you all to avoid hitting. It's down at the bottom of your screen. It says Present Now. Please do not click that, as that will interrupt the presentation. And finally, if you called in via telephone today, please send me an email at mfrey@pgahq.com. That way we can make sure you get your MSR credits for today. Back to Jeff.
Thanks, Matt. Before we turn it over to Clarky to get the day started, just a quick introduction to our presenter this morning. If you don't know much about Alice, it's a pretty cool read. If you go to her Wikipedia page, there's a lot of really cool stuff on there. Alice was a member of the LPGA Tour from '78 to '98. She has 8 wins, including the 1985 Dinah Shore as her major. She was actually president of the LPGA Tour in 1993. And she's also captained the junior Solheim Cup team a few years ago. Alice is a dual member, PGA, LPGA. She's also a member of the PGA of America National Rules Committee, and she served in various roles at DuPont Country Club since 2016. Before that, she was a major part of the McDonald's LPGA Championship at DuPont. Did I miss anything else? Is that about right?
Close. The LPGA Championship ended in 2009, and I was at Penn Oaks teaching for a couple seasons, and then started at DuPont in 2014. So. All
right, nice. And Clarky, why don't you wake everybody up?
I shall. As the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us pledge allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam, God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
So nice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Matt, I'm going to go ahead and present.
Get it.
Go for it.
Matt, you got me there?
Yes, all good.
Okay, good. All right, everybody. Welcome to another rules seminar. We're going to go over Rule 14 today. It's a very meaty rule. I guess that's a nice way of putting it. So I hope you have your coffee mugs filled. And it's actually 2 slide decks. It's a lot of slides, a lot of words on the page. If you're kind of getting into this for the first time, you might want to grab, your Rules of Golf book and kind of read along and make some notes. I found that to be the easier way to learn it. As I said, it's a meaty rule. It takes up 15 pages in the rule book. And there's a lot going on here. When we look at Rule 14, it gives us 7 subsections, and these are all the routines that we're going to use when we're applying other rules. I went through the rule book trying to find out how many rules reference Rule 14, and it was over 130. I kind of stopped counting. So a lot of other rules in the book refer us to Rule 14 to tell us how to proceed, and that's kind of what we're going to go over today. Even the simplest of procedures like marking, lifting, and cleaning, putting your ball back on the spot, replacing it on the spot, those first 2 subsections, a lot of things can go wrong actually, and at the club level they usually do, and at the junior level they can also. But anyway, so we're going to go through these and try to get a handle on Rule 14. Don't be dismayed if you get lost with some part of it. You know, reading it through in the rule book will probably help clarify it, and also will answer any questions. Our purpose statement, we're going to cover, you know, when and how the player may mark the ball, spot the ball, lift it, clean it, how to put it back into play so it's played from the right place. I think Clarky went over in Rule 6.3 in the status of the ball about, you know, ball in play. We'll get some review on that. And when a lift or remove ball is to be replaced, the same ball must be set down on its original spot. So we're going to see in 14.2 that replacing and spot go together. And in 14.3, when you're taking free relief or penalty relief, any of the relief procedures, you're allowed to substitute a ball or use the original ball. And you're going to be, if you're dropping, it's going to be in a very specific relief area. Fortunately, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So when we get to 14.5, we're going to see that any mistake in these procedures can be corrected without penalty as long as we do so before the ball is played. But if you do play from the wrong place, you're going to get the general penalty. And we have some more complications in stroke play for playing from the wrong place. Okay, so here's our rule with our subsections. We're actually, this presentation, we're going to look at 14.4 first. This one's not really a procedural rule. It just is going to tell us when the player's ball is back in play after the original was out of play, and it ties back in, and Clarky may have even covered this on status of the ball. So we're going to get that out of the way first. Okay, when is the player's ball back in play after the original is out of play? We have 3 situations here. When the player's ball is lifted from the course or is lost or out of bounds, it's no longer in play. So the guy on the left has, you know, lifted it to clean it on the putting green, we hope. Middle picture, search for 3 minutes. As soon as it hits 3 minutes and 1 second, the ball is lost. And of course, on the right, the ball is out of bounds. Those balls, none of those balls are in play. So when is the ball in play again? It's pretty clear cut. Only when the player plays the original or another ball from the teeing area, okay? And those are going to use the teeing area rules that we saw in an earlier presentation. And the player replaces, drops, or places the original ball or another ball with the intent for that ball to be in play. So intent is the key thing about putting a ball back into play. I mean, if you just set the ball aside on the ground, it's not in play. You have to have the intent. Here, Johnny's replacing his ball on the putting green, and his intent is to put that ball back in play. And if you just reminds us, this rule reminds us, if you return a ball to the course in any way with the intent for it to be in play, the ball's in play, even if you do it wrong. You might toss the ball down. We're going to look very carefully at what dropping in the right way means a little bit later in the presentation. But just because you drop in the wrong way or drop it in the wrong place, that if your intent was to put the ball in play, it is in play. And we will see that you can correct those mistakes, if you realize it in time. So if you substitute a ball, even when you're not allowed under the rules, if your intent is to put that ball in play, it does become the ball in play. Here we have Johnny again on the putting green. And I don't know Johnny Miller personally. I've met his dad. I've never met him. But the namesake, so I get to call him Johnny. Anyway, he's gone ahead and put his lucky putting ball down instead of his original ball. That is not allowed under the rules. And if we replace, drop, or place, again, in a wrong place, in a wrong way, or using a procedure that didn't apply, that doesn't mean the ball's not in play. It is. That ball is in play. Here's a little key reminder from when we were going over status of the ball. A replaced ball is in play even if the ball marker marking its spot has not been removed. this little definition of in play, but the key takeaway here is it's putting the ball marker down doesn't, you have to, lifting and replacing the ball takes it out of play and puts it back in play. The placement and removal of the ball marker is not what, takes the ball out of play or puts it back in play, okay? Actually, you see that on the tour. I used to see it on the tour. Players would, put their ball back in front of their ball marker, and they didn't think the ball, they thought they could let whatever happened happen. And always, if something did happen, you had to ask, well, what was your intent? And the other thing we see is a caddy quite often will clean the ball, and we'll see this later, puts the ball behind the marker. There was no intent to put the ball into play. That's fine. Any questions on 14.4? I'll give you guys a second. I think the main thing here is this is kind of a little bit of review. It goes back to status of the ball and probably the marking it, knowing that the marking it is not what takes it out of play. It's actually when you lift it, and it's actually when you replace the ball, not when you remove the ball marker. And knowing that even if you do something wrong, if you put it into play in the wrong place or, any of those things, dropping the wrong way, that ball's still in play. You're not going to be subject to penalty until you play a stroke with it. We're going to see under 14.5 that you can fix those things under our so-called eraser rule. Any questions on 14.4, Matt? Can everybody hear me okay?
No, sorry, no questions. I was
Okay,
having microphone.
Onward. Okay, now we're going to get to the procedures, the procedural things. And they call these, I think David Saber likes to call these subroutines, and he equates it to a computer program. And in the way that's true, I mean, all of these procedures, as I said, they are referenced in over 130 places throughout the rule book. So these are the procedures you're going to use every time you play. Even if you play the perfect round of golf, hitting every fairway into a perfect lie and every green, you're still going to, when you reach the green regulation, you're going to be marking your ball, lifting it, cleaning it, replacing it. And as we'll see, and as we know as club pros, things can go wrong, and they often do. And there are mostly procedural penalties, which is a one-stroke penalty. Start thinking procedural penalty versus penalty relief penalty for these one-strokers, and I'll call those out as we go. But we use these every time we play. We got a couple definitions. We've already probably looked at this in some other presentations, but we'll just review it. And marking the ball is to show the spot where a ball at rest is. Either, and you can do it a couple ways. You can place a ball marker. Doesn't have to be right behind. It can be right behind or right next to. But with the purpose, to be actually marking the ball, the purpose is to show the spot where the ball must be replaced after it's lifted. The other way we can do it is we can hold a club on the ground. This happens a lot on the putting green. Very convenient not to have to, pull out a ball marker. That's allowed. Definition of ball marker, this has changed, and this is something for maybe if you're teaching juniors or coaching high school, college players, probably not the college level, but just make sure they know that you can no longer mark with anything. Starting in 2019, ball marker has a specific definition, and it is an artificial object when used to mark the spot of a ball. They give us a short list here to give us some examples. It can be a tee, a coin, an object made to be a ball marker or something, fancy schmancy, or a poker chip or whatever. It does call out that it's a small piece of equipment. Doesn't give you any more specifics than that. But the main takeaway is that it has to be an artificial object. You can no longer use a piece of a leaf or a little pebble that's on the green to mark your ball. Well, you can, but you're going to earn a one-stroke procedural penalty, as we'll see. So when the rule refers to the ball marker being removed, it means a ball marker that was in place to mark the spot of a ball, not just a coin that's laying there, okay? All right, here we go into 14.1. Very straightforward. This rule is going to apply to the deliberate lifting, not the accidental movement, but the deliberate lifting of a player's ball at rest. And it includes picking it up by hand, rotating it, or otherwise deliberately causing it to move. Key point to note here, if you got your book out, rotating. Rotating is considered lifting, okay? And as we're going to see next, you're going to have to mark the ball to do that if you want to avoid penalty. So before lifting a ball under a rule that requires it to be replaced on its original spot, you must mark the spot. Okay, player in the previous slide was entitled to identify the ball if they couldn't see their mark. And they, a lot of times players in the rough, they'll just rotate it, and that's fine, but you need to mark that spot before you rotate the ball. Coaches, point that out to your players at the high school and college level. Again, I'm going to put the ball marker right next to the club. Okay. You can use either of those methods to mark. A little review there. This is new, that after replacing the ball, you must remove the ball marker before making a stroke. So if you've replaced your ball on the putting green in front of your coin, or maybe your fancy ball marker, you can no longer putt. You can no longer just, you know, tap that ball in or putt the ball with the ball marker there. You have to remove the ball marker. That was new in 2019. Okay, here we're going to start some of our procedural one-shot penalties. If you're really going to be a rules nerd, you're going to have to make some lists, and this is one you might want to start with. Are one-shot procedural penalties versus one stroke or one shot, you know, one stroke procedural versus one stroke penalty relief. And there's a reason for that. Okay, if you lift a ball without marking, you mark it, and that happens, and talk about the guy on the right here in a second. You mark it in the wrong way. Maybe I've used a little pebble on the putting green or a piece of leaf, or I make a stroke with a ball marker left in place. Those, you're going to get, the player's going to get one penalty stroke. Those are procedural penalties. The player below can identify the ball, you know, can't quite see his identifying mark, so he's just going to rotate it, but didn't mark it first. Rotating is considered lifting and has to be marked. So there's a one-shotter there. On the right, there's actually a video that goes with this, but I couldn't get it to play properly. So this is Jason Scriver. This was at the Vic Open a couple of years ago, and he was on the putting green and he marked his ball, and it was in the way, you know, in the line for his the guy that he was playing with, the other player. So he moved it over using his putter head, moved it over a couple putter heads, and just went brain dead. And when he moved it over, he spanned it over properly, and he picked the marker up and put it in his pocket and walked away. And the commentators are going, Allie, what did he just do? And Allie's going, well, I don't know. I think he picked up his marker. And sure enough, he walks over and looks at his, in this case, used to be fellow competitor, the other player, and he's like, what did I just do? You know, so anyway, he incurred a one-stroke penalty. You don't think that kind of stuff can happen, but you know, when you're in the heat of competition, all kinds of dumb things can happen. It only cost him a shot. As we're going to see, even though he didn't know the exact spot, the marker was no longer there, he's going to estimate that spot and replace his ball. Here's our volume discount rule. If multiple rules breaches result from a single act or related acts, it refers us back to Rule 1.3c4. Multiple procedural breaches. So this is why you want to keep track of these procedural penalties. If the single act or related acts breach more than one of the procedural requirements for marking, lifting, cleaning, dropping, or replacing, we're going to see more of these as we get into this rule. And the penalty is one stroke. And the example they give here is you've lifted your ball without marking its spot, and you cleaned it when you weren't allowed. So, okay, I'm entitled to identify my ball, but that's one of the few times that when my ball is lifted, I am not allowed to clean it. You can do what we call a partial clean to identify it, but only if that's absolutely necessary to identify. So, you know, if I failed to mark it, I lift it, I clean it, 1 + 1 is going to equal 1, okay? Volume discount for some of these, I don't know, I hate to call them dumb penalties because I've incurred many of them myself, but these little ticky-tacky procedural penalties, that's going to get you one. We're going to see lots of reference. I think there's over, I think I counted maybe 20 references to Rule 1.3c4, and we'll look at it in more detail as we go. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that in this presentation, but it is helpful when you're learning how to count up these multiple breaches. All right. This is a common sense thing. When a ball is lifted to take relief under a rule, the player is not required to mark the spot before lifting the ball. So remember, you know, marking has to go with a ball that's lifted and must be replaced, a ball that you're going to replace on a spot. But when you're lifting to take relief, this gentleman's taking relief out of the ground under repair, you're not required to mark the spot. I think it's a good practice to mark the spot. I know if I'm a referee and I'm going to help a player in a situation like this, I just ask them to put a tee down to help me keep a frame of reference, you know, while they take their relief, or leave the ball down until we've determined the reference point for the dropping area. But anyway, a good practice, but you don't have to. Who may lift the ball? Pretty limited here. not quite as limited as dropping, as we're going to see, but very limited. Obviously the player, and we get our reference back to rule 22 and 23 that tells us that, in foursomes and four ball, a partner can do anything the player is allowed to do. Anyone the player authorizes. Maybe my backs bother me, and I can't quite identify my ball, and I authorize the player that I'm playing with, to mark it and lift it for me so I can identify it as mine. That doesn't happen very often. More likely you would authorize your caddy. When you're doing this, the authorization must be given each time before the ball is lifted. I can't say at the beginning of the round, hey, I've got a bad back today. Would you mind, always marking and lifting my ball for me? I cannot do that. I can't even do that for my caddy. However, we do have this new exception in 2019 code that the caddy on the putting green, the caddy may always lift the player's ball without authorization. So if the ball's on the putting green, my caddy can lift it without me authorizing it. And this was really a practical addition to the rules, I think, because most clubs that have caddy programs, the caddies tend to want to, some parts of the world, they do it as part of their job. And other places, they want to do it to help and speed up play and whatnot. So I like this exception. Anywhere else, this is just reminding us that if the caddy lifts the ball without authorization when it's anywhere except on the putting green, we're going to get a one-stroke penalty. Cleaning the ball. A ball lifted from the putting green may always be cleaned. Monica cleaning her ball. And this is a default situation here. In general, we're going to look at 4 exceptions, but in general, a lifted ball, the ball that you lifted from anywhere else, may always be cleaned with these 4 very specific exceptions. So for the most part, when you've got the ball in your hand, you can clean it. Let's look at our exceptions. If you're lifting the ball to see if it's cut or cracked, cleaning is not allowed, period. No cleaning to any extent, okay? I can't think of the last time I saw a ball that was cut or cracked. Of course, I don't hit it hard enough anymore to do much damage. We're always entitled to identify our ball. So this is what we call the partial clean. Cleaning is allowed only as needed to identify it. We saw that on, I don't know if we went over to 7.3, but you guys can look at that yourself. But again, if you don't need to clean it, actually, if you don't need to lift it to identify it, you're really not allowed to lift it. But if you can't see your mark, you're entitled to, to lift it to identify it. You don't have to announce that to anybody. And you can clean it as needed. If you can see an identifying mark without cleaning it, you don't clean it. And so it's only, we call that a partial clean, maybe. All right? But be very careful with that. When you're lifting your ball because it interferes with play, it's interfering with another player, and one of you has to, mark and lift your ball, you are not allowed to clean it in this situation. You see players very carefully pick the ball up with 2 fingers, or maybe they go set it down. So there can't be any doubt that they haven't given it a rub or, wipe on their slacks. No cleaning when the ball's interfering with play. And the 4th situation is if we're allowed to lift the ball to see if it's in a condition where you might get relief, but we're not allowed to clean it until we know we are getting the relief. So here Tiger's in the rough. Perhaps he's checking to see if his ball is embedded, okay? So he's marked it, lifted it, referee's right there to watch. The ball's not embedded. He is not entitled to clean it. He must replace it on that spot. Of course, if he is entitled to take relief, that's a different story. He can do all kinds of stuff. So if you clean your ball when you're not allowed, you're going to get 1 penalty stroke. Here Nick is, he's lifted his ball to identify it, and he's given it a big old white, but it wasn't necessary. You add 1. Back to our multiple procedural breaches, okay? Referring us back to 1.3c4. Again, a single act or related acts breach 1 or more of the procedural requirements, marking, and all these things that we're going to look at in 14, marking, lifting, cleaning, dropping, replacing, or placing. And the penalty's 1 stroke, again, as Nick's doing here. Maybe he lifted it and didn't mark, and he also cleaned it. 1 + 1 is going to equal 1. The other way I used to look at this, and I don't think the rules people would approve, but it's like, okay, if I failed to mark my ball and I lifted it, I might as well clean it because it becomes a free clean at that point. Don't tell the USJ folks I said that. But anyway, as a player, I used to think of it that way. Again, our reminder that in foursomes and four ball, either partner may act for the side, and actions are treated as action of the player. All right, so there we have 14-1, marking, lifting, and cleaning. Very straightforward stuff. I think the big changes for 2019 is that the ball marker is defined now as an artificial object, so you can no longer use that little pebble or twig or anything to mark your ball. Always get put together in your mind that a ball that's going to be replaced, whether if you're operating under a rule that requires you to replace your ball on spot, say a ball at rest that was moved, or for any other reason that you're required to replace on that spot, the ball must be marked. Okay, put that in your head. Who may lift? The player or anyone authorized. And then cleaning is pretty much allowed everywhere when the ball's in your hand, except for those 4 situations we looked at. Any questions?
No questions just yet.
All right, replacing ball on spot. How hard can this be? Okay, you wouldn't think you could even earn a penalty doing this, but you can. So we'll go over this real, not quickly, we'll go over this and just help refresh. If this is new to you, it'll be new information maybe that all of us have played. So a lot of it will go, oh yeah, that's what I always do, but you might just not have realized there was a possibility of doing something wrong. So let's look at 14.2. We're gonna have a definition, an introduction, and then there'll be 5 sections to this rule. The 2 at the end, 14.2D and E, those do get used. What do you do when the lie is altered, and what do you do if the ball doesn't, you replace your ball but doesn't stay on the spot? So this is good stuff. Okay, here's our friendly iguana. And this rule is going to apply whenever a ball is lifted or moved and a rule requires it to be replaced on a spot. So if you're operating under a rule that requires the ball to be replaced, whether that ball was moved and you don't know the exact spot, or whether you marked it and lifted it, this rule applies. We have a definition for replace. It's very specific. You notice that in lift, it didn't really give us specific instructions on lifting. Actually, you can lift a ball with a club. I mean, if you're on the green, you mark your ball, you could scoop it up with your putter, the back of your putter, as long as you're not testing the surface of the green. But replace has its own definition. It's very specific. You're going to place a ball by setting it down and letting it go with the intent for it to be in play. And if you set a ball down anywhere without intending it to be in play, it has not been replaced and it's not in play. So if you've just set it aside so your caddy can clean it, or I don't have pockets, in my shorts that day or whatever, it's not in play. But the act of replacing is very well defined. Whenever a rule requires a ball to be replaced, the rule involved identifies a specific spot where the ball must be replaced. So replacing is always going to be on a spot. And this goes on to tell us that if you lift it, cause it to move, whatever, putting it back, okay, this is not during search, this player just is chatting and got careless and they've booted their ball, okay? Or it could be during search. One has a penalty, one doesn't, don't worry about that. But your ball at rest has moved, and you gotta replace it. You might not be paying attention, you might be searching in heavy rough or leaves or something, and you moved your ball during search, or you moved it clumsily this way, and you've got to replace it. You don't know the exact spot, but you're going to estimate that spot. The estimated spot becomes the specific spot. Okay, it becomes the spot. When you are replacing a ball, you must use the original ball. We have a few exceptions, a few common sense exceptions here, but unlike when we're taking relief, when we're taking whether it's free relief or penalty relief, we can always use another ball. We'll see that when we get to 14.3. But when you're replacing a ball on a spot, you must use the original ball. And we do have 4 real common sense exceptions that don't happen. One of them happens some, but not that often. Okay. Exception 1, the original ball cannot be recovered with reasonable effort and in a few seconds, as long as, notice how deliberately is underlined, the player did not deliberately cause the ball to become unrecoverable. So let's watch Ian Poulter here.
Bizarre happening here at the 4th earlier today. Ian Poulter, birdie putt. Well, yeah, I mean, you can't hit it easy enough. I mean, there's no way. I'm sure he couldn't believe the ball stopped there in the first place. Now watch this. Goes to mark the ball and kind of swipe at it to pick it up.
Whoops.
And he loses it, and it goes in the water.
Okay. I love that clip because I think it's funny. I think Ian Poulter's funny. But if the ball's not immediately recoverable, but the player didn't deliberately throw it into the pond. He was a little bit miffed, and he was, that that puck got away from him, but that was not deliberate. Another way that could happen is, and this happened on the LPGA Tour when I was playing, a player, not me, threw the ball to her caddy, and it was either, according to the caddy, it was a bad throw, according to the player, it was a missed catch, and the ball went in the penalty area behind and was not recoverable. So then you can replace. Second exception, the original ball is cut or cracked. Of course, you're going to be able to replace in that situation. That's covered under Rule 4.2. Just know that it has to, you know, while playing the hole. So if you did it on a previous hole and you started another hole, that's a different story, but we're not going to get into 4.2. This one does happen a lot. It's, again, very common sense. So play resumes after it had been stopped. We know we have a lot of suspensions of play in golf. It's hard to get through any tournament week without some kind, either whether it's weather-related, of course, becomes unplayable. Worse yet, we have electrical storms, darkness, we have to finish the next morning. And, you know, it's kind of unrealistic to expect players, caddies, or anybody to keep track of that golf ball. So after play has been stopped and it is resuming, the player may use any ball. And then the last one, this was, I think, covered before under Rule 6. Ball was played by another player's wrong ball. You know, Ed plays David's ball. We're not going to make David run up there and get that ball. He can use another ball. But those are your only 4 exceptions. When you're replacing a ball on a spot, you're operating under a rule that requires you to replace your ball on a spot. You have to use the original ball in all other cases. All right, who can replace it and how must it be replaced? Always by the player. Of course, it says only by the player. There's our little foursomes and 4-ball statement reminding us that the partner can do anything the player's allowed to do, or any person who lifted the ball, even if that person wasn't allowed to do so. And the person who might have caused it to move. You know, as a player, if somebody else causes my ball to move, I want to replace it. I want their help in getting it back on the right spot. But if the player plays a ball that was replaced by someone not allowed to do so, you get 1 penalty stroke. So I cannot authorize my caddy to replace my ball. If I authorized the caddy to lift the ball in the first place, or if it was on the putting green and the caddy lifted the ball, that's fine. But I can't authorize someone who didn't lift it to replace it. That's a procedural penalty. There's 1 stroke penalty to add to your list of procedural penalties. How it must be replaced? This seems very straightforward, but you know, as we all know, there's ways this can go wrong. The ball must be replaced by setting it down. Again, very specific definition that we looked at, and letting it go so it stays on that spot. This means not rolling it over into place with your club, which is probably the most common infraction to earn this procedural penalty. You got to set it down on the required spot and letting it go so it stays on that spot. You might get some high school players if they think they're cool and they're going to roll the ball back over with their putter, or you're going to roll it over with your club. And yeah, as long as you get it back in the right place, you're not going to get the penalty for playing from the wrong place, but you're going to get a procedural penalty for not replacing properly. There's our 1 penalty stroke to add to our procedural list. Replaced it in the wrong way. The most common one is to roll it with a club, or maybe your foot. Can't do that. Well, you can, but you earn a little 1-stroker. All right, spot where the ball is replaced. Now I'll go back to that first slide. It's going to be replaced on its original spot. We've gone over this, which if not known must be estimated, except when it must be replaced on a different spot. And these 2 rules are coming up next, 2D and 2E, and they talk about when the original lie is altered and what to do if the ball doesn't stay on the spot. But other than that, I mean, if the ball is going to be replaced, you're going to either know the spot or you're going to estimate it using your best judgment, and that's going to become the spot. Replacing and spot always go together. Okay, here we have our little bubble talking about accepting the player's reasonable judgment. This is covered under Rule 1.3, and I'll just go ahead and put this all up here. Essentially, this is saying that if the players proceeded, you know, to the best of their ability to figure out where the spot is, where the ball crossed, you know, the edge of the penalty area. If they've done everything that's reasonable, you're going to accept that judgment, even if you get later evidence that they were wrong. And it makes sense. You know, they've got to play in a timely fashion. Now, the player is required to get all the information they can. You can't just go, oh, I know it crossed here. You consult with the other players and go, you know, where do you think that crossed the edge of the penalty area? Where do you think that ball was moved from? Usually if you're moving, maybe you're searching in leaves or something, and you move your ball in play during search, you're not going to get a penalty now. That's a great change. But you may not know the exact spot, but you're going to estimate, and you're going to be pretty darn close, and that becomes the spot. At the bottom, the last bullet, if you do become aware of a wrong determination before the stroke is made, you must correct it. And the best example of this, we're going to see we can correct a lot of things when we get to 14.5. Maybe we've all, you know, we're playing in a group, and Clark and Matt and I are playing, and I hit my ball into the red penalty area, and we're not sure exactly where it went in, but we get up there and we decide, okay, it crossed the edge right here, and I go on and I use that as my reference point, and I take my relief, my 2 club length lateral relief. And meanwhile, Clarky's walked up ahead, and we knew the ball just barely trickled over the line, and he finds it 20 yards ahead, just over the line. It's like, oh no, hey, wait, Allison, you know, your ball had to have crossed up here. I haven't made a stroke yet. We've got new information. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to see when we get to 14.5. I can redrop, or I can actually even use another option, but I can drop. I'm actually required to drop in the right place. If I play from this place, I'm in a penalty situation. But if I've played from this place before Clarky finds my ball up there, I'm fine, because we, you know, I used reasonable judgment. We made our best guess. We're going to accept that. That's a real important concept. All right. If the ball, this is a little bit of thing to get your head around. If it was at rest on, under, or against any immovable obstruction, integral object, boundary object, or growing or attached natural object, the spot of the ball includes its vertical location relative to the ground. The one that comes to mind is maybe a ball in heavy rough. You know, it was kind of perched up a little bit. Just know that the spot includes the vertical location relative to the ground. So therefore you have to replace it on, under, or against such object, all right? Up against a boundary stake, for instance, you got to put it back there. Good little distinction here, loose impediments, and I know Clark's going to cover this next week, but if loose impediments were removed as a result of the ball being lifted or moved, they do not need to be replaced, okay? Searching through leaves, move several leaves, ball moves, I'm going to replace the ball. You know, I don't have to put those leaves back over my ball. We do have some restrictions, and Clark will go over this in 15.1, but so if I'm replacing a lifted or moved ball, there is an exception that I can't move loose impediments that if my ball were there, it would cause the ball to move, all right? We'll see it's different when we're dropping in a relief area, but if you are replacing a ball, you can move the other leaves around there, but if you move something that had your ball been there, was likely to have caused your ball to move, you would be in a penalty situation. So be a little bit careful. Okay, here we go. Altered lie. And this is a good one. There's one little distinction here, the little nuance that'll help you guys out. If the lie of a lifted or moved ball that must be replaced is altered, you're going to replace the ball. We've got 2 ways to do it, okay? The first one is when the ball's in sand, whether that be a bunker or anywhere else. And the second one is anywhere except in sand. So these are the 2 categories. Let's look at them. When the ball is in sand, whether it's a bunker, I always used to think, you know, hard to think that, you know, sand other place on the golf course that your ball could get buried in, but in parts of the country it does. So sand anywhere on the course, in order to replace the ball in its original spot, you actually have to recreate the original lie as much as possible. So this player, his ball is buried in the sand. He's searching, fine to do that, using the rake, searches, moves the ball during search. He's going to replace the ball in its original spot, but because he's in the bunker, because he's in sand, he is required to recreate the original lie. He can't just set it on top of the sand. In sand, it's very easy to recreate the lie. So that makes sense. Ball was half plugged. You know, I mark it because I'm in Clarky's way. He takes his ball out and my ball marker and everything else. You know, I can smooth that sand over, and that I'm required to put that ball back sort of half plugged in the sand. Recreate the lie in sand, no matter if it's a bunker or elsewhere on the course. You are allowed to leave a small part of the ball visible. I used to think this was one dimple, but I think in this picture there's, you know, a few dimples showing. But anyway, you are allowed to leave a small part of the ball visible if you're recreating the lie for a ball that was completely covered by sand. And if you fail to recreate it, you're going to have played from the wrong place, because again, that vertical location and in the sand you have to recreate. If you don't, it's the wrong place penalty, which in match play you go to the next hole. In stroke play, we'll see under 14.7, you add 2, and then you decide was it a serious breach or not. In this case, unless there was a, I don't know, big face to that bunker, this would not be a serious breach. All right, anywhere except in sand. You're going to replace the ball by placing it on the nearest spot with a lie most similar to the original lie. This happens, you know, a cart runs over the ball in the light rough, and you don't really know, okay, you're going to do within one, I'll just go through the rule. You're going to do it within one club length of the original spot. And again, if you don't know the original spot, you're going to estimate it. And you could be fairly certain here that all this rough was pretty consistent. Can't be near the hole, and it's going to be in the same area of the course as that spot. We're in the general area. You know, when you're going to have your lie altered, you're going to keep it in the general area when you place it on the spot. And so this spot becomes the spot, all right, within one club length, not near the hole, same area of the course. And let's see, if the player knows that the original lie was altered and does not know what the lie was, I think I just went over that, you just estimate the original lie and replace the ball under one of those two scenarios. Again, do your best to get it right. Okay. Here's an exception for Rule 5.7. This is when play has been stopped. And we won't go into this in too much detail, but in essence, we have weather conditions and play's been suspended, or even if it's just for darkness and you come out the next day and the maintenance crew has prepared the course, you are not necessarily going to get the lie that you had when play was stopped. So there are a couple little exceptions in there, but for the most part, you just accept it for better or for worse. Usually it's for better when you come back after a suspension of play. Here's a common one, what to do if the replaced ball does not stay on the spot. You try to replace it, it does not stay, you try it a second time. So you're going to try twice. That's kind of hard to see, and I don't like this video because it doesn't show the player trying twice, it just shows them trying to put the ball in the spot and the ball moves. So now they're going to try a second time, and if it doesn't stay the second time, you place it on the nearest spot where the ball will stay at rest. I think this video is going to play for us in a few seconds here. But there's a limit, okay? If the original spot, in any case, you're not going to go closer to the hole, so not near the hole. If the original spot's in the general area, ball won't stay, you're going to place it in the general area. In a bunker or penalty area, the nearest spot must be either in the same bunker or in the same penalty area. Okay, here we have a player, ball's up against a movable obstruction, a break in a bunker. This is very common. It's the reason we don't like breaks in bunkers is because they do these sort of things. And he's marked it. He didn't have to, but that was a good practice to mark that. He's got a referee helping. Gonna try, put it back there twice. Doesn't stay. Now the referee's gonna have him try to place it nearby. And a couple, inch and a half didn't do it. Now we'll try 3 or 4 inches. Okay, that's kind of where it should have probably ended up in the first place. So, and also notice the good use of the radio by the referee. Those antennas come in handy. If the original spot was on a putting green, the nearest spot must be either on the putting green or in the general area. So we could be going off the putting green. We don't in this video, but we could. Let's see if our video is going to play. Oops, it was trying. Come on, Phil. This was at the U.S. Open at Pinehurst. 15th hole, par 3. Ball lands on the green, ends up in its own pitch mark.
Now the trick's going to be, how do you get it to stay there?
The trick's going to be, how do you get it to stay there if you couldn't hear the audio? So Phil's allowed to, he's marked his ball, he lifts it, fixes the ball mark.
Where the ball just went right into something that bounce right at the edge of stay. Phil's struggling. We're trying to get his ball to come to rest here.
He's tried twice. The referee's with him. You're always safe when you have a referee with you. Hanley tells him, let's just keep going. Come up here. This is a big false front on this green, so it was very possible that he would have had to go off the putting green to the fringe. You can see how steep that is. The umbrella also is a handy pointing device for referees. Nope. At this point, I thought he was going to end up on the fringe. But he does find a spot on the putting green. So he is allowed to mark it there.
All right, so the ruling is, in that situation, guys, when you can't get your ball to come to rest, you are allowed to move it to the nearest point, no closer to the hole where it will come to rest.
Okay, and notice in this rule, in 2E, when the ball's not going to stay on the spot and we need to move it to the nearest spot, there's no one club length limit. Bill went multiple feet off. People questioned, what should he have gone down to the fringe on the front of the green? It actually, the place he went, the referee was right there. The camera angle distorts it a little bit, but it was a possibility. When you are on the putting green, that spot might very well be in the general area. Okay, incorrect substitution or playing from a wrong place, you're going to get the general penalty. And if multiple breaches result, okay. This takes us back to 1.3c4 and something you can look at on your own a little bit. But when you're combining substituting a ball incorrectly, you're not allowed to substitute. You're on the putting green. The best example I can think of is Johnny's on the putting green and he's moved his marker over to get it out of the other player's way. And then when he goes to replace his ball, he forgets to move the marker back and he substitutes his lucky putting ball. So he substituted when he wasn't allowed. He plays the ball from there. He's played from a wrong place. Under 1.3c4, we're going to see that 2 + 2 = 2. This usually, when you see substituted ball or wrong place combined in the same procedure, there's that volume discount that we talked about. Obviously, it only applies in stroke play because in match play, you've lost the hole. But that's good to keep in mind. Substituted ball, wrong place, and these little procedural penalties tend to all happen, at the same time in some cases. And we can often, in stroke play, or even match play if they're one-strokers, get the volume discount. Foursome score ball, that's our little statement. Either partner acts for the side, and they are treated as the partner. All right, here's our first little quiz question. In singles match play, we have a few of these. We don't have too many, but we have a few. And I'm going to kind of walk through them. For those of you that are taking the exam, I'm sure everybody has their best practices for how to take that brutal exam. But we'll just walk through these and I'll kind of talk you through it. In singles match and individual stroke play, okay, we know the form of play. Which one of the following is true? We're looking for the true statement. I always circle or underline the true because the true and false thing, is easy to trip up on. The ball must be replaced only by the player. Now, that's not true. If I had somebody else, my caddy might have lifted my ball on the green or somebody else that I authorized. So I don't think that one's true. Someone put an X through that one. Okay, after a player's original ball has been played by the player in another group as a wrong ball, another ball may be used to replace it on the original spot. That sounds true to me because we looked at that as one of our 4 exceptions when you're replacing on a spot that you can substitute. So I'm going to circle B. But I like to read the rest of them just to kind of confirm. Except on the putting green, if the original spot for the ball to be replaced is not known, the player must replace it by dropping the ball as near as possible to the estimate. Now, this has a lot of gobbledygook in it, and it also, it kind of, if you've got a lot of old rules knowledge, it can trip you up. But remember, when we're replacing, we're not dropping. Original spot, even if it's not known, we're going to estimate it, and that becomes the spot, and we're always going to replace. Replace and spot go together. There's no dropping on a spot without getting a penalty, okay? X that one out. If the original lie of a player's ball to be replaced has been altered, it is always replaced by placing it on the nearest spot Okay, like that, with a lie most similar to the original lie that is within 1 club length from its original spot, not near the hole, and in the same area of the course. This statement at first glance is like, yeah, that's true. But whenever you see that word always in one of these quiz questions, you want to take a little second look. Well, that's true of the second scenario when we looked at the lie alter, but what about the first one when the ball's in sand? Then we have to recreate the lie. So that makes that answer false. And there's our correct answer is B. The only reason I took the time to read through that, these tests, I use the whole time they allow me because I'm trying to read through every answer. I'm trying to get the answer I think is right, but I want to eliminate the other answers just kind of for confirmation, because quite often you'll catch yourself. Like if I read through that quickly, I would have looked at D as possibly being right too until I read it more carefully. And again, the little red flag with that word always. All right. Any questions on replacing? Remember, replacing and spot always go together. Replacing and spot always go together. You almost always have to use the original ball with those 4 common sense exceptions. Looked at lie altered. Again, in sand, you recreate. Elsewhere, you place it in the nearest spot within a club length. If it doesn't stay on the spot, there in 2E, remember, we're not limited to a club length. If it's not staying on the spot, you might go yards. You do have to stay in the same area of the course, except if you're on the putting green, you can go to the general area. All right? Again, seems like a simple process, but things can go wrong. Remember, when you replace the ball, you have to set it down. You can't roll it over with the club to put it back on its spot. All right, if we're good to go, we'll go right into 14.3. So we were looking at replacing on a spot. Now we're going to look at dropping in a relief area. So pair, replacing and spot together. Now you're going to pair dropping and relief area together. Anytime we're dropping a ball, we are going to have a very specifically defined relief area. We've got some definitions to look at, an introduction, and then this rule has 4 parts to it. Okay, this was all new stuff in 2019. Hopefully we're all pretty familiar with it by now, but this will be a great refresher. The evolution of dropping. I'm sure some of you are old enough, just like I am, to remember all of those and then some. All right, definition, we'll go through some definitions just quickly. Pretty common sense, but this was new stuff in 2019. Dropping is to hold the ball and let go of it so it falls through the air with the intent for it to be in play. All right. If you let go of that ball without intending it to be in play, it has not been dropped and it's not in play. I'm clumsy, I dropped my ball, whatever. There has to be intent. As we're going to see, even if you drop in the wrong way, if your intent was to put it in play, it is in play. That goes back to what Clarkey covered in status of the ball. Each relief rule is going to identify a specific relief area where the ball must not only be dropped, but must also come to rest. Here's our knee height part of it. As soon as the ball leaves your hand, it's in play. And this little interpretation just is telling us that even though you're dropping from knee height, it may not fall the full distance of your knee. And the example given is the player's on a steep slope, standing at the bottom of the slope facing up. They drop from knee height, but the ball might only fall a short distance. It can't touch you or your equipment on the way down before it hits the ground. Okay, relief area, very specific. Anytime we're dropping, whether it's penalty relief or free relief, we are going to have a relief area. It's the area where you must drop when taking relief under a rule. And its location and size are going to be based on these 3 factors. We'll look at those one by one. The reference point is the point that you measure from. So you're always going to determine a reference point before you determine your relief area, okay? The one up above, this player's taken back on the line relief for the penalty area, and the one down below, the player's taking the lateral option for a red penalty area and using the point where it last crossed that red line as her reference point. The back on the line relief, got a little bit more room to play there, and Clarkey's going to go over, I think, is it Clarkey or you or Tom are going to go over those penalty relief rules. 1 or 2 club lengths. Almost all the time it's 1 club length. The only time we have a 2 club length relief area is when it's the lateral option of penalty relief for a penalty area or an unplayable ball. The limits, this is kind of interesting. You know, we aren't always guaranteed of having this nice half moon shape here. So the location and also in parentheses size of the relief area may be limited in 1 or more ways. Might only be in the general area, maybe it can't be in a bunker or a penalty area, or maybe it has to be. In any case, it can't be near the hole in the reference point. We know that, okay? And if you're taking free relief, it has to be where there's no interference as defined by that particular rule. All right. Do we have to have complete relief from a penalty area? No, our ball just has to be outside of it. We can stand in it. That'll get covered in length. All right, and using club lengths to determine the size, you can measure, you know, through things, or you can measure across a ditch, but you can measure through things. The most common one might be a tree, sprinkler head, or a drain. You can, you know, go right across. But if you're measuring on a slope, you just measure along the ground. That's all this part of the definition is telling us. You don't visualize a laser going through the ground. The committee, great. If you guys run tournaments, you're in charge of events at your club, college, high school events, you know, the committee procedures, and I think Tom may go over some of those in our last session, but real important. And having a dropping zone, when the committee does put one in, it is treated as a relief area. Definition of club length, this was new for 2019. It's going to be the longest club that you've chosen to play with that day, other than your putter. Can't use the long putter. So if this player, their driver is 43 inches long, whether they're measuring with their driver or not, a club length for this player on that round is 43 inches. We use club lengths, and just really the only time we use club lengths is in defining the teeing area or determining the size of the relief area when we're using one of the relief rules. All right, dropping a ball in a relief area. This is a lot of slides to go over what hopefully has become pretty comfortable and pretty commonplace for everybody. But there are numerous opportunities for those little ticky-tacky one-shot procedural errors. So let's get to it. This rule is going to apply whenever a player must drop a ball and take in relief under a rule. It could be penalty relief, it could be free relief. But if you've got to, you know, if you're dropping in a relief, if you're dropping, you're always going to have a relief area. Keep that paired in your mind. It also includes when you're going to complete relief by placing a ball. 14.3c is the drop, place situation. The player has dropped in the right way twice, and the ball has gone outside the relief area in this case, and they're now going to place it. After dropping twice, they get to place it. So the placing of the ball to complete the relief procedure is included here. What happens if you improve the relief area before or when dropping a ball? It refers us back to 8.1. This is our rule, conditions affecting the stroke, that we went over earlier in one of the rules presentations. And remember, if this player was replacing a ball on the spot, you got to be a little bit careful about moving those loose impediments. When you're dropping in a relief area, you can't improve that area by stepping. The way I categorize is like, I can't step on stuff. I can't flatten a straggly piece of grass that's growing. I can't smash the grass down. I can't smash down and replace divot. I can't step on stuff to affect my cats, conditions affecting the stroke, but I can pick up loose impediments to my heart's desire. So I can tidy that relief area up before I drop, okay? Important distinction between dropping and placing when it comes to dropping and replacing when it comes to moving loose impediments. And I think Clarkie's going to go over loose impediments, but it might not reference this. But go ahead and clean up that relief area. Pine straw, leaves, twigs, clean it up before you drop your ball. You may use the original ball or another ball. You can always substitute a new ball. So this means that the player may use any ball each time he or she drops or places a ball in this rule. You could go through a whole sleeve. You could go through more than that, I guess. You know, each time you're dropping it, when you go to place it, maybe you've made some wrong, but we'll look at it as our wrong drops. I don't know why anybody would, but you could use, I like this change because it used to be you could use another ball for penalty relief, but not free relief. And I think this keeps from trapping a player in a little ticky-tacky roll. So go ahead, feel free, pull out a fresh sleeve and drop away. Very different than when you're replacing the ball on a spot, okay? Dropping in the right way. I've had a hard time getting used to saying this right way thing, but I tried to think of the dropping now because it's an important distinction. It means all three of these things, which are actually 5 things. I don't know if anybody's talked to David Stabler about that, but when I go through dropping in the right way, I'm thinking of all 5 of these things. Player must drop the ball, period. Ball must be dropped straight down. There's our knee height, our newest thing that players were not comfortable with until probably well into 2019. And it can't touch me or my equipment on the way down. Doesn't say anything about after it hits the ground, but it can't on the way down touch the player or the equipment. And it must strike the ground in the relief area. If you do all 5 of those things, now we'll go through them one by one. A little redundant, but you guys, I never mind the repetition. Only by the player. Can't authorize anybody to do it. Can't have your caddy do it. We do, we're going to see our exception for 4-ball enforcements, but neither the player's caddy or anyone else can drop your ball for you. Well, you can have your caddy drop it if you think he or she's a great dropper, but it's going to cost you a penalty stroke for a procedural error. All right. Number 2, straight down, knee height without touching. See, I think those are 3 things. But anyway, I'm going to let it go from knee height so it falls straight down. Not going to toss it from knee height. We're not going to give it a little spin. I'm just going to drop it straight down. And it can't hit you on the way down. There was a video in here of Helen Alfredson that I actually took out because it didn't play very well. But, she was at the Senior Women's Open a couple of years ago, and she's taking relief from a drain, an immovable obstruction. And she's saying to the referee, now, how do I do this without hitting myself? You can hear Alfie saying that. And she did just fine, but it just can't hit you on the way down. Have some nice examples here of knee height. I think the one where Brandon Grace is down here, the photo on the bottom left, just shows that those 2 yellow lines, that would be his knee if he were standing and not squatting. So the fact that he's squatting, he's going to drop a little bit above in a place that would match his knee if he were standing or kneeling. Okay, the ball must be dropped in the relief area. Doesn't matter where the player stands, but the ball has to land in the relief area. All right. Any one of these things that go wrong, the ball has not been dropped in the right way. The rule is telling us it's been dropped in the wrong way, and you must drop again in the right way. Important little nuance for those of you that are new to the rules or are new to refereeing. There's no limit on how many times you can drop in the wrong way. None of them are going to count towards your drop, place scenario, all right? So I had a player when I was officiating on the tour, and we were taking, as we're going to see, the relief areas can be kind of odd shaped, and they can be skinny little wedges, and the player was getting relief from a bleacher, grandstand, TIO, and she was in front of it, and so we found her nearest point. Her relief area was a little wedge, a little skinny wedge, and the ground kind of sloped down to the green, and she was trying to drop on the edge closest to the green, and first 2 drops she missed the relief area altogether. And I said, now you don't get to place. You've got to, we've got to have 2 that land in the relief area first. And so the 3rd one she got into the relief area, the next one she missed, and so that didn't count. And then the 5th one she got in, and the ball rolled out of the relief area, and she was allowed to place it. And she's fine. She goes on her merry way. Players really don't care if you know the rules or not. As long as they get to go keep playing golf, they're happy. So I walked back to my cart, and the marshal said, why didn't she get to place it after the 2nd drop? Because to his eye, she was dropping, close enough. But if that ball doesn't land in the relief area, it doesn't count to the drop place. Oh, there's the rule number 14.3C2. We're going to get to that next. Got ahead of myself. Okay. If the player does not drop again and instead makes a stroke at the ball from where it came to rest after being dropped in a wrong way, got a couple potential things that can happen here, a couple different penalty scenarios. If the ball was played from the relief area, the player's just going to get that 1 stroke procedural penalty. This gentleman forgot, he dropped it from shoulder height. that the ball, ended up in the relief area and he played it from within the relief area, he's going to get a 1-stroke procedural penalty, okay, for dropping in the wrong way. However, if the ball was played from outside the relief area, he dropped in the wrong way, that's 1. Played from outside the relief area, that's a wrong place, that's a general penalty. This player is going to get the general penalty. He does get the volume discount. Playing from a wrong place and a procedural penalty under 1.3 C4, he does get 2 + 1 = 1. If he's in match play, he goes to the next tee. All right. Here's a good little nuance. It's not a nuance, it's the rule. If after it was placed, if the ball was played, after it was placed when it was required to be dropped, no matter where it was played from, the player gets the general penalty. So if the player made the mistake of placing the ball when they were required to drop it, even if they place it in the relief area, this rule, as part of the rule, is telling us that that player is going to get the general penalty, okay? I haven't really seen that happen very often, but it definitely could at the club level and the high school level. Back to that, though. That scenario, any of these scenarios, 14.5 is going to show us that as long as we haven't played, that's why the key word there is the ball was played. If we haven't played the ball, we can correct these multiple mistakes. All right. This rule only applies when the ball was dropped in the right way, okay? There's our 5 things, or well, our 3 things according to Mr. Stabler. I call them 5. All those were satisfied. We've dropped it in the right way. Ball stays in the relief area, comes to rest in the relief area. We've completed relief. If the ball dropped in the right way comes to rest outside the relief area, here's what we're going to do. Just remind us that the ball must land and come to rest in the relief area. This clarification, I won't spend too much time on, but if you're officiating at a high level, it's a good one to know. And it's a little counterintuitive, because if any part of the ball is in the relief area, you're fine. The ball is considered in the relief area. But if any part of the ball is near the hole in the reference point, you are not in the relief area. So that's just a little technicality for people that officiate. Again, I think the reasonable judgment rule would prevail here. If you and the official, you're doing the best you can. All right. This little note, it does not matter whether the ball after hitting the ground touches any person, equipment, or other outside influence before coming to rest. If it comes to rest in the relief area, the player has completed taking relief. I thought we had an animation here to show this ball hitting that player's foot, but we don't. So let's just say the player drops. Well, there it is. Ball hits her foot, stays in the relief area. As long as that was not intentional, she's fine. It goes outside the relief area. Go ahead and proceed as we're going to show you next. Okay. Just reminding you that there's no penalty to any player if a ball dropped in the right way accidentally hits you. We will see later that intentional is a different story, but accidental is fine. Old rules knowledge, if the ball deflected off you, you had, at any point you had to redrop. Not anymore, only if it deflects off you on the way down, okay? We'll see our deliberate action and penalty statement when we get to 3D. All right, dropped it in the right way, comes to rest outside the area, going to drop it a second time. This is our drop, place rule that we referred to earlier. You complete taking relief by placing a ball. Make a distinction here. You're completing relief by placing a ball. You're going to use the procedures that we looked at back in 14.2 for replacing a ball. But you're really just completing this relief procedure, this dropping procedure. But we follow the same things back in 14.2 about who must replace it and what, how it must be replaced, can't roll it over there with the club, etc. Okay. But there is a difference in the language. Replacing is italicized because it is carefully defined. Placing is not. Placing is used to complete a relief procedure. And there it refers us back to those places in 14.2 for, they were calling it placing a ball, but it's under the replacing part of the rule. Going to put it where it first touched the ground after the second drop. Doesn't stay on the spot. You're going to try a second time. And if it doesn't stay on the spot, then you're going to place it on the nearest spot where it will stay at rest. Looking at the same thing we looked at under 14.2e, it could be quite a ways. Okay, there's 14.2e. I'm not going to read that to you. We just went over that. This interpretation just tells us that, you know, if you must complete relief of a dropping procedure by placing a ball, it could result in the ball being outside the relief area. And our example here is a great example. You drop it for the second time, comes to rest, you place it, it doesn't stay after 2 attempts. The nearest spot, not near the hole where the ball will stay at rest, might be inside or outside that relief area. Think of a steep bank where the ball has embedded, would be a very likely candidate for that. All right. What do we do if a ball that was dropped in the right way is deliberately deflected or stopped? Well, as you can guess, this is a problem. So if it's deliberately deflected or stopped, you have to deliberately touch it while it's in motion after it hits the ground. Because we know on the way down, if it hits you, you're going to redrop. The ball in motion, or if the ball in motion hits any equipment or other object or person, such as the caddy that I deliberately positioned or left in a particular location so that my equipment or that caddy might deflect or stop the ball, I've got a real problem here. I am cheating. Okay, deliberate. I've dropped it in the right way. One might be I'm standing, I've got my relief area and there's a divot hole there. And I'm going to stand on that divot hole so that when I drop, if that ball rolls to that divot, I'm going to let that deflect off my foot. That is wrong. You cannot do that. Okay, I dropped it in the right way, deliberately let it hit my foot so it wouldn't go in the divot. I'm going to have to drop again. All right. This drop is not going to count. And doesn't count towards one of my 2 drops. Okay, we went over that earlier. And if it was me or my caddy that did it, or if another player did it, I can't imagine that. I wouldn't let anybody close to my ball. I'm going to get the general penalty. And a note in here, this is one of those penalties, even though this sounds like it's a relief procedure, it's not. This is a general penalty for, I'm going to call it cheating. And it doesn't get the volume discount. So even though I might do several other things wrong and end up playing from a wrong place and do all kinds of stuff, my penalty, my general penalty for deliberately deflecting or stopping my ball or positioning someone or something else to do so does not go away. All right, here's a really common sense exception. When there's no reasonable chance that the ball is going to come to rest in the penalty area, dropped it in the right way, it's rolling down a steep hill, you know, whether it's, interesting note here, whether in the relief area or outside the relief area, but there's no reasonable chance it was going to stay in the relief area or come back to rest in it, there's no penalty there. Okay, you can do that. It's treated as having come to rest outside the relief area when that is the only possible place it would have ended up. And it does count as one of your 2 drops. Okay, penalty statement. Playing from a wrong place or playing a ball that was placed instead of dropped is going to be the general penalty. Match play, you're going to go to the next tee. Stroke play, you're going to play on. We will get to wrong place under 14.7. There's some complicating factors there or some complexities there. But again, here's our multiple discount with rule 1.3c4. I've, you know, played from a wrong place and maybe I did some other procedural thing, I get my little volume discount. All right. Our same statement that we've seen before, I'll skip over that for foursomes and 4-ball. Little quiz question on 14.3, dropping the ball in the relief area. Which one of the following is true? I'm going to circle or underline true. If a player asks his caddy to drop for him and the caddy does so, intending to put the ball in play, okay, you know the ball's in play, the ball is not in play and the player will be penalized for playing a wrong ball if he plays it. I don't think that's true because even though I can't authorize my caddy to drop the ball, but I've asked him to do it, I think I'm authorizing him. You know, we're going to get a procedural penalty here of 1 stroke, but the intent was to put the ball in play and by gosh, it is in play. So I don't think that's the one. the player spins the ball as he lets go of it while dropping from shoulder height, okay, there's a couple procedural things right there, and the ball hits and comes to rest in the relief area, the player gets the general penalty if he plays it. I think this one's false because, we looked at that. You do all those things wrong, you're going to get the 1 + 1 = 1, and as long as you played from within the relief area, you're okay. Player can squat down to drop his ball as long as when he does, the ball is dropped from the height of his knees when in a standing position. I like that one. That's our Brandon Grace example. But let's look at the last one. A drop ball that strikes the player or his equipment any time before it comes to rest must be dropped again. Any time is the problem there. It's only if it hits you, strikes you or your equipment on the way down before hitting the ground. And there's our true answer, C. All right. Any questions on 14.3? Anytime we're taking relief and dropping, we can use another ball. All those little things for dropping in the right way, those are little one-stroke procedural penalties. If the ball, any of that's done wrong, those drops are not, going to count towards your drop place. And again, put dropping and relief area together in your mind. Any questions?
None yet.
All right, I'm going to escape here and go to the next slideshow. Let me see, get my part 2 going. Okay, are we ready for part 2? Grab a sip of coffee. The worst, I won't say the worst is over, but this will go a little bit quicker for these last 3. Okay, we've looked at all these earlier relief procedures when we have to do all this stuff, and we can get all these, we can really get ourselves in a fix with possible penalty situations. 14.5 is just, if you're a referee, this is a delightful rule, or if you're a coach, because you can correct these mistakes as long as you do it before you play the next shot. 14.6, we're going to go over playing the next stroke from where the previous stroke was made. That might be stroke and distance, or when a stroke is canceled, for example. 14.7, playing from a wrong place. That one will take a little bit of putting your thinking cap on, get your head around it. So this presentation, 14.5, like I said, going to recover mistakes in replacing, dropping, placing, or substituting. You can correct all of those as long as you haven't played the ball. We're going to go over how to proceed when playing under stroke and distance, depending on the part of the course you're going back to, and what it means to have your ball in a wrong place, and what happens if you play it from there. Obviously, match play is easy. You lose the hole, you move on. But in stroke play, it gets a little more complicated. In most cases, it's the general penalty, and you finish the hole with the ball that was played from the wrong place. But if there was a serious breach, and we're going to look at what those might, pardon me, entail, you do have to correct. And that's where we have one of our, there's very few procedures in the rules of golf where you can be playing 2 balls at one time. And there is a stroke play procedure. If you're unsure if it's a serious breach or not, we're going to go over that. And of course, the other one for stroke play is when you're in doubt of procedure. And I think Tom's going to cover that under Rule 20. All right, 14.5. This is affectionately called the eraser rule or the fix-it rule, because you can correct a lot of these things before you play the ball. Here, Johnny has substituted another ball. He's got his lucky putting ball on the green. He's not allowed to do that. But if somebody playing with him or his caddy says, hey, look, dude, you can't use your lucky putting ball, he can fix that. He can lift that ball without penalty and correct the mistake, okay? But only, again, emphasis here, there's a timeline. It's only allowed before the ball is played. For all of these corrections in 14.5, it's going to be before the ball is played. Okay, the player's ball in play. Here the players put the ball in play, but they've put it in play in a wrong place, or maybe it came to rest in a wrong place. In this case, it rolled out of the relief area, did it in a wrong way, or used a procedure that did not apply. You can lift the ball without penalty and correct the mistake, but again, only before the ball is played. All right. The part that gets a little tricky, and if you're new to the rules, or you just need a big refresher like we all do, when can you change? Okay, I've proceeded in the wrong way. I know I can correct under 14.5. Can I change my relief option? Can I change which rule I operate under. So when correcting a mistake that we've made in taking relief, whether you must use the same rule and relief option or you can change to a different rule or relief option is going to depend on the nature of the mistake. And as we go through these, get to the first one here. There's 3 of them, 3 scenarios. Kind of keep in mind that you're going to keep what you did right. And I'll explain that as I go through. Or you can also think of it as like I'm stuck with what I got right. But you can keep what you got right. Okay. First scenario, ball was put in play under a rule that did not apply. Second one, the rule applied, but the ball was dropped or placed in the wrong place. You did part of it right. And the third one, ball was put into play under a rule that applied. That was correct. It was dropped in the right place. That was correct. But for whatever reason, the rule requires the ball to be dropped or placed again. Maybe it rolled out of the relief area. I did it in the wrong way. But anyway, so you did most of the things right. All right. Put into play under a rule that did not apply. In correcting this mistake, the player may use any rule that applies to his or her situation. I didn't do anything right. The example we have here is that the player is in the penalty area. They mistakenly took unplayable ball relief. And when we get to 19, I think Tom's going to cover that. We know that they can't take an unplayable in a penalty area. That rule doesn't apply to penalty areas. So the player must correct the mistake. Well, or get a big fat penalty. And they correct the mistake by either replacing the ball if it had been lifted, in which case, we might have a 9-4 situation here. Or just go ahead, now you've realized that you're in the penalty area, you can't use Rule 19, you're just going to go ahead and take penalty relief under Rule 17, and you're going to use any of the options under that rule that apply to your situation. Second scenario, the rule applied, you put the ball in play under the rule that applied, but it was dropped or placed in a wrong place. Right rule, wrong place. The player must go on to take relief using the same rule, but may use any relief option under that rule that applies to his or her situation. The example we have, I talked about this a little bit earlier, the player used lateral relief, mistakenly dropped outside the required relief area. In correcting the mistake, you have to continue under that rule, but you can go to any of the relief options that are available. Rule 19 is unplayable. This player's, I think, proceeding under penalty area relief, so the picture doesn't quite go with the example, but use your imagination there. It applies the same way. The example I gave was if we're playing and I hit my ball in the lateral dollar in the red penalty area and I'm taking lateral relief and we've all agreed my ball, crossed at a certain place. And then Clarky gets up further and before I've played my ball, he says, oh no, here's your ball. It crossed way up here. I have to correct my mistake if I don't want to get a penalty, but I now can change my relief option. All right. Right rule, wrong place. Continue under that rule, but change the relief option at your discretion. Third case scenario, right rule, right place. Okay, dropped in the right place, but the rule requires the ball to be dropped or placed again. Most common one is going to be, you've dropped it she's done everything in the right way, but the ball is now outside the relief area. The rule requires it to be dropped again. In correcting this mistake, we're stuck with what we got right. The player must go on to take relief using the same rule and same relief option. Okay. Here's our example. It was a lateral relief option for Rule 19, the unplayable ball rule. Dropped in the right relief area, but was dropped in a wrong way. And we have those variety of things that we can, do to drop it in the wrong way, or it came to rest outside the relief area. In correcting the mistake, the player must go on to use 19.2 C, which is the lateral relief option for a ball that's unplayable. So again, you're stuck with what you got right. I didn't even use the right rule. I get to choose any rule that does apply in correcting my mistake. I had the right rule, I dropped in the wrong place. I can correct my mistake, but I can use any relief option open to me. And that's usually going to only happen under the penalty relief stuff. Or, I did everything right, but maybe I forgot and dropped from shoulder high, but it did land in the relief area and I have to continue under that same rule. All right. There are no penalties for a ball that's lifted to correct the mistake. This was new in 2019, so I'm going to correct my mistake. I don't have to count any penalty strokes for actions that were taken relating to that ball after the mistake and before the ball was lifted. The example here is I've gotten careless because I'm chit-chatting and I booted my ball. Then I found out that it was, I accidentally caused it to move. That gets wiped away. But if those same actions were also in breach of a rule relating to the ball that was put in play to correct the mistake, the penalty is going to apply. So let's say I did something to affect the conditions. I stepped on some divots here. I broke off some grass. Even though I'm correcting my mistake, I'm still subject to penalty for improving that dropping area. Here's our little quiz question. Which of the following must the player continue with the same relief option used for the previous drop when correcting a mistake under Rule 14.5? So same relief option, we know we must have been using the right rule and we must have dropped it in the right place, but something is causing us to have to redrop. All right, let's look at these. A player drops in the 1 club length relief area when taking stroke and distance relief from the penalty area, and his ball rolls forward and comes to rest outside the relief area. Ball's outside the relief area. I'm required to redrop, but everything else I've done is fine. Use the right rule, dropped in the right place. I think that's my answer. But I want to go on, so I'm going to circle that one, but I want to go on and look at the others. Player drops outside of penalty area using the lateral relief option when he has virtual certainty that his ball's in the penalty area. Okay, so was entitled to operate under the penalty relief rule. Before playing the drop ball, his original ball is found in the penalty area 20 yards forward of where he dropped. So this is my situation I was describing with, maybe I'm playing with Clarkie. Okay. Before playing, my original is found forward of where I dropped. Oh, okay, so I did drop in the wrong place. So I'm not required to use that same relief option. Okay, I think that's not true. The player drops using lateral relief from shoulder height, 3 club lengths outside the edge where his ball is known to have last crossed into the penalty area. Nope, dropped in the wrong place. The fact that you dropped in the wrong way is not relevant, but the fact that you dropped in the wrong place allows you to change relief options. The player declares his ball unplayable in a penalty area. We know there's no such thing as an unplayable in a penalty area after looking at our example, and drops using the lateral relief option within 2 club lengths of his ball and in the penalty area. That's the one that was the first scenario. You've gone under the wrong rule. You get to start over and use a rule that applies. So our first answer that we thought was right is correct, but again, it kind of helps to read through and kind of think through all of them when you're taking these little quizzes, whether it's on usj.org. They really do help expand your rules knowledge, especially if you're going to officiate or if you're going to take the darned exam. And also generalarea.org has a lot of good exam questions. Okay. Any questions on 14.5? The big thing is make sure, you can fix a lot of things if you do it before you play that next, play that ball that you've done something wrong with. The next 2 are pretty straightforward. Any questions, Matt?
No.
Okay, we're gonna soldier on, and we'll take questions at the end too. Soldier on. 14.6, making the next stroke from where the previous stroke was made. We have a definition for stroke and distance, but this rule applies not just for stroke and distance, but anytime you're required to cancel your stroke and go back to where the previous stroke was made. And it's a pretty straightforward rule. It just helps make sure that we are, getting back to the right place. And we have 3 parts to it after our introduction: teeing area, general area, penalty area, bunker, and putting green. Real quick definition here. It's the procedure when you take relief under any of these penalty rules, 17, 18, or 19, where you're going to play a ball from where the previous stroke was made. And the term comes from the fact that you're only getting 1 penalty stroke. As a kid, I always felt like I was getting 2, but no, you're only getting 1 penalty stroke, but you are losing the benefit of any distance towards the hole that you had gained from the previous stroke. And this rule is going to apply whether you're required or allowed under the rules to make the next stroke from where the previous stroke was made. So maybe you hit your ball out of bounds, you're required to go back. If your ball's lost, you're required to go back. You're playing from playing match play down here below and you play out of order, and your opponent, if you hit a nice shot here, that opponent's probably going to ask you to cancel your shot and replay it from where you made that previous stroke. So it can be stroke and distance relief or after a stroke that's canceled or otherwise does not count. So how you put the ball into play depends on the area of the course that you're in. Okay, pretty straightforward. And in all these situations, again, you can use either the original ball or another ball. It's only when we're replacing a ball on a spot that we have to be careful there. All right, from the teeing area, original ball or another ball may be played from anywhere inside the teeing area, and it may be teed. We're going to follow the teeing area rules for this. In the general area, the penalty area or bunker, again, originally you can use any ball, and it must be dropped in. Okay, we'll go over this. Is getting redundant, you guys. I'm sorry. We're going to go over the relief. Anyway, I'll just read it. It's going to be in this specific relief area. The reference point is always going to be where the previous stroke was made. You might have a divot there, and the ball was probably sitting at the back of that divot if you're a decent ball striker. The size is going to be 1 club length. And the limits, okay, not near the hole, has to be in the same area of the course as the reference point. On the putting green, the original ball or another ball must be placed on the spot from where the previous stroke was made. And even though 14.2 talks about replacing a ball on the spot, we're actually using this to complete a relief procedure. Using the procedure for replacing a ball, even though it's called replacing, it references us back to 14.2. And if you play from a wrong place, you're going to get the general penalty. And typically you might play from the wrong place would be a ball that ended up outside the relief area, would probably be the most common one. Where you placed it when you were supposed to drop it. Okay. There's our volume discount. Any questions on 14.6?
Done yet.
Anything there is just wherever you made that previous stroke, that's going to be your reference point in your relief area. If you're on the teeing area, obviously there's no relief area. You proceed under the teeing area rules. If you're in the general area, penalty area, bunker, you're going to use that 1 club length relief area. And if you're on the putting green, you're going to place the ball. Playing from the wrong place. Got a couple definitions, and pretty straightforward if it's match play, and a little more complicated if it's stroke play. Okay, here's our definition. Any place on the course. A wrong place is any place on the course other than where the player is required or allowed to play his or her ball under the rules. So playing a ball, our first two things here, if you're playing a ball after replacing it on the wrong spot, Johnny forgot to move his coin back, or without replacing it, his player has moved her ball and not replaced it, and the rules, require the ball at rest that's moved to be replaced. Those are both wrong places. And the other common one can be when a drop ball is played from outside of the relief area. Notice it doesn't say that, a placed ball. If you've gone through drop, drop, place, and you're on a slope and you're placing your ball to complete that relief procedure, you may end up outside. But if you're dropping a ball and it goes outside the relief area, you are definitely in a wrong place. All right, playing from outside, this is a kind of a public service announcement here, even though it's part of the definition of wrong place. It just reminds us that playing from outside the teeing area when you're starting the play of a hole or trying to correct a mistake is not playing from a wrong place. That was covered back under Rule 6 about starting the play of a hole and what happens if you play from outside the teeing area. And it's easy to kind of link the two in your mind, but don't. These are very distinct rules, and this is a nice little PSA that reminds us of that. All right. Playing from a wrong place. After starting a hole, the player must make each stroke from where his or her ball comes to rest, except when the rules require or allow to play from another place. Okay, that's all pretty straightforward. And it just tells us that you must not play from a wrong place. Pretty direct rule. Here we have our penalty statement. It's the general penalty. In match play, you move on. In stroke play, there's no volume discount here in match play because you're moving on, you've lost the hole. But in stroke play, you might have had some little procedural breaches. Maybe I, dropped from too high, or I, had my caddy drop the ball or whatever. So I can have a procedural breach combined with the wrong place breach that equals just the general penalty of 2 strokes. Now, next part of this rule, notice how it highlights in stroke play only. After playing from a wrong place, what are you going to do? The player has to decide. There's a decision-making thing here, and this can get a little bit confusing. And if you're a referee, boy, you've got to get all the facts. And we'll see later that the committee is going to help you sort this out. But anyway, you've got to decide whether to play out. In most cases, you're probably going to, if it wasn't, you just forgot to move your marker back on the putting green, so you putted your ball from the wrong place that was 2 putter heads over, you just play on. That is a place where members at the club will get confused. They, think they have to correct that mistake. And no, it's not a serious breach. We're going to look at that. So what you do next depends on whether it is a serious breach. In serious breach, you're going to have to think, did the player gain a significant advantage by playing from the wrong place? We actually have a definition. Of course, this is only for stroke play. When playing from the wrong place could give the player a significant advantage compared to the stroke made from the right place. And we got some parameters to look at. So in making this comparison, you got to take several things into account: the difficulty of the stroke, the distance of the ball from the hole. That's a big one. Distance as an official on a committee, that has a big part to play. The effect of obstacles on the line of play. Do I not have to negotiate the penalty area anymore? Or maybe trees aren't in my way? And the conditions affecting the stroke. In other words, the lie of the ball in the area of your intended swing, that kind of thing. So you're going to look at all those things to decide if it was a serious breach. Again, it just reminds us that it doesn't apply in match play. There's no such thing as serious breach because, once you play from the wrong place, you're done for that hole. All right. Going to look at these 3 scenarios. Not a serious breach, serious breach. I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay. All right. Not a serious breach. The player must play out the hole with the ball played from the wrong place without correcting the mistake. Our little animation here, you can see this ball is on this immovable obstruction, this cart path. The nearest point of relief was on the far side of the path. The player came over to the near side and dropped in a wrong place and played. Yes, this player has played from a wrong place. They're going to get 2 strokes, but they're going to continue on with that ball. This is not a serious breach. There would have to be something really extreme here in terms of the lie, the slope, the heaviness of the grass, the obstructions in front. Not a serious breach. Just play on. Okay? Don't try to correct. We get in trouble when we try to correct. All right, serious breach. You must correct by playing out the hole with the ball played from a right place under the rules. So in our little animation, this player's hit a ball across the penalty area. Notice it's a yellow penalty area. It comes back in across that far edge, and the player incorrectly drops using a lateral option that they're not entitled to. That is a serious breach. Not only have they gained, let's say that was a 150-yard shot, they've gained 70 or 80 yards. They no longer have to negotiate the water. This is the obvious extreme of serious breach. If you don't correct it before starting playing the next hole or before returning your scorecard, you are disqualified. So serious breaches must be corrected. I think that's where, club players get confused and high school players. It's like, oh, I played from the wrong place and I realized it. I think I've got to correct it only if it's a serious breach. So that's something to help your players understand. All right. Now I'm going to go back and correct it. Now the player is using the proper relief procedure back on the line. They've gone back, played their second ball from the right place under the rules. This is a real important point. If you try to correct your mistake, you've corrected your mistake, you have to report to the committee. This is crucial. So the player must report the facts to the committee before returning their scorecard. You think, well, I've gone back and I've fixed it. And this applies whether the player played out the hole with only that ball. They abandoned the one that was the serious breach. It applies even if you scored the same, you played out with 2 balls, or you even scored the same with both balls. And you think, well, why is that? Well, you can imagine things can get worse, and they will here in a minute. So you have to report this to the committee. This, whether or not it's a serious breach and which ball is going to count, that's for the committee to decide. In the same way that when you play a second ball in Rule 20 because you're not sure of how to proceed, the committee has to decide, so you must report to the committee. Here this player said, nope, no problems out there today that we didn't handle. Well, guess what? That's a DQ, trunk slammer. All right, your score for the hole depends on what the committee decides. And we got, the committee has a little more work to do here. Okay. Serious breach, non-serious breach. Obviously, here's our no serious breach. A good rule of thumb for you coaches, high school, college level, if your player has played from a wrong place and they panic and they think they need to correct it, let them go ahead, tell them they can go ahead and play a second ball because it might be a serious breach, but always have them play out with that first ball too. So if a second ball was played in this situation, all strokes of that ball don't count, obviously. The 2-stroke penalty is put on the first ball. All right, serious breach. Any more strokes played with that ball? Don't count. Score with the ball to be played. Score with the ball played to correct the mistake of playing from the wrong place does count. And just get the general penalty for that ball. Now it gets a little dicier. You decide to correct the mistake, but your correction was also from a wrong place. And so we've gone from bad to worse here. And we have, our two scenarios. If the second ball wasn't a serious breach, you're going to walk away with a big number, but you get to keep playing. You're going to get a total of 4 penalty strokes added to the score with that ball. 2 for the original ball from the wrong place and 2 for playing the other ball that you tried to correct with from a wrong place. But the second ball wasn't serious, so you're still playing. Bad to worst to absolute worst case scenario, if the second ball was also a serious breach, you're going to get DQ'd. Okay, pretty severe. All right, this is our last question. I know we've got a few more minutes to go here. We can take questions after. This is our last quiz question, and I think we went over this last year too. But anytime they have to count, anytime they have us counting, that's when I go, oh gosh, where's my pen and paper? So we're going to play from a wrong place. There's going to be penalties involved, even without reading the question, because they've got numbers at the end. So we're going to have to add this up. So let's read through the question first. It's stroke play, obviously. Player's drive is hit toward a penalty. Well, not obviously, but the fact that we're going to have a score tells us that. Hit it towards a penalty area. Heavy rough and bushes outside. After 3 minutes of searching, both outside and in the penalty area, the player drops the ball outside the penalty area, estimating the spot where he thinks his ball probably crossed into the penalty area. This player does not have knowledge or virtual certainty, so this is a problem already. He hits the ball onto the putting green and holes out with 2 putts. He consults a referee who tells him his drop outside the penalty area was not proper because there was not knowledge or virtual certainty that his original ball was in there. And we'll see that when we get to Rule 17 about penalty area and knowledge and virtual certainty. But anyway, so the referee instructs him that he has to go back to the tee and correct this error by playing out the hole from there. Plays from the tee, 3 more strokes after that. What's his score? So if you're doing an exam, I usually I've done it a couple different ways and I still end up making counting mistakes, but it helps to kind of write it a little column, and on the left I put a T, that's for the talent strokes, and on the right column I put a P, and that's for the penalty strokes. So in this case, players hit a drive, so I've got 1 talent stroke. He searched, he took his penalty relief, and you can look at this in one of 2 ways. He has to go back to he's played from the wrong place, so anything that happens after that doesn't count. He has taken a penalty stroke to get out of, quote, the penalty area. He was not entitled to do that, but the referees told him he has to go back to the tee. His only option really was stroke and distance back to the tee for a ball that's lost. So the penalty stroke that he took, we're going to say that's his stroke and distance penalty, and we're going to have 2 more penalty strokes for playing from the wrong place. So at this point, he's back on the tee, and I've got 3 penalty strokes, and I've got 1 talent stroke. He hits a drive. That's a talent stroke, and 3 more from there. So I end up with 5 talent strokes and 3 penalty strokes. And that is the answer. The answer is 8. On these type of questions, I find that it's easy to forget. It's like, okay, he wasn't allowed to use penalty relief. He played from the wrong place. and the referee sent them back to the tee, it's easy to forget to add in that penalty stroke for the stroke and distance of going back to the tee. That's a common mistake. So hopefully that kind of helps figure that one out. These are the ones that really you've got to think through and either count on your fingers of both hands or, you know, make a little grid or something. Okay. That's playing from the wrong place. 14-7. Talked about serious breach. That has to go to the committee to be resolved. And even if you correct your serious breach and the score is the same with both balls, make sure you report to the committee. They have to sort it out and tell you which ball you're going to score with. And the wrong place penalty, remember, it can, if you're in stroke play, it could possibly give you, you know, you might get a little volume discount under 1.3C4 if you have some little procedural penalties that go with that, or maybe you substitute the wrong ball and play from the wrong place. 2 + 2 could equal 4. So there are some volume discounts when playing from a wrong place is combined with some of these other acts. All right. Oops. All right, that's all I've got. If anybody has any questions, happy to stay and answer questions. Sometimes that stuff I get reading it, and I muddy it up in my own mind, even though I understand it. So these PowerPoint slides get a little bit wordy. And again, I would encourage people to just, you know, use that Rules of Golf book, read through it carefully, make little notes, highlight. Like for Rule 14 alone, I mean, I've got tons of little underlinings and notes and stuff in my book. Replaced and spot always go together. That's one of my notes I put by 14.2. This was back when the rules code first came out. Original ball must be used when replacing on a ball except for the 4 exceptions. So I highlighted, underlined those kind of things, left myself an example of not replacing the ball properly is rolling it with my club. I try to give myself a reminder of like, how could you not replace a ball properly? I mean, that helped me a lot in learning this stuff, the new stuff. Thank you all for being on the presentation. I know rules can be dry. I know these PowerPoint decks can be overwhelming. You can only imagine sitting through 3 days of this. They are doing the rules online this year. And I think that's a nice way to do it because they have all of these presentations. They've been done at Golf House, and you can go back and review them at your leisure. We are not allowed to share the materials that the USGA gives us, unfortunately, but you can, if you sign up for one of those rules workshops, have access to all of these presentations. It's over 20 hours of material. Any questions?
Alice, Clarkey here. You're teaching one?
I'm doing one of the sessions in March. Yes.
Okay. My question now is it 3 days or is it? How does it work?
It's an interesting format. Great question, Clark. So it's what they're doing is they're giving people access to all these online presentations, and then we have 2 instructors, one PGA, one USGA, and we're in a time slot. So the week that I'm doing it in March, I think my time slot is it's an hour and a half for 5 straight days. So from Monday through Friday, there'll be 2 instructors for an hour and a half, and we don't really teach the rules so much. We have a slide that kind of summarizes the rule, and we just have a couple minutes to talk about, and they cover maybe in those, each day you maybe cover 3 or 4 rules so that by the end of the week you've covered them all. And our job is to kind of just summarize the rule, maybe an important point or 2, and then we get questions from the students, and they can be random questions, and we end up answering rules questions. And that's, so far, it's been very interactive with the participants, but you don't get a lot of instruction on the decks themselves. The students are expected to go back and review the decks, and they have access to those until the end of March.
Okay.
It's different. I mean, I'll be sitting here in my basement, with my Echo and my dog barking upstairs and whatnot, but that's how we're doing it. I think so far the feedback's been very good. I like the fact that, you can go back and you can look if you're having trouble with a certain part of Rule 14, or whatever rule it might be, or maybe the CATs, the conditions affecting the stroke, you can go back and you can rewatch those presentations and multiple times. And I think that's very helpful. And then the questions have been great. I mean, they're going to, I've sat through one as a student, I sat through one presentation earlier in the month, and the questions were very good. And they sprinkle questions in there. If there aren't questions coming from the audience, they've got these questions, and people on their phone or their tablet, answer the questions anonymously, and we do little quizzes like we did in this presentation. We're going to try to figure out a way for people to take the exam remotely and online. They had not decided that last I know, because obviously a whole set of challenges with proctoring that. Thank you all for listening through that, and hope everybody stays safe and healthy and has a great golf season, and it's going to be here before we know it. Is everybody taking part in the PGA show? Anybody? I did the coaching summit yesterday. I haven't really signed up for any sessions. I don't buy for the club or anything, so I did my big education piece yesterday.
Yeah, I sat through. What did you think of the summit, Alice? I sat through that yesterday too.
It was good. I mean, it's like all of this online stuff, Jeff. I missed the in-person interaction. Sure. The content was not as robust, as for the 2-day in-person thing, obviously. But I think given the circumstances, they did a great job. They had some really exceptional presenters.
Yeah, I thought the panel discussions were really good. Pete Cowan was obviously really, really good. But yeah, I think Trillium and the group did a nice job with what they had, to work with. So
exactly. Yeah. And it was convenient to do it from my couch. I did it from the couch upstairs because
I think they got over 1,700 attendees yesterday, so it's pretty cool.
That's excellent. Excellent.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Alice and Clarky, for everything so far. It's been a great off season, and we certainly do appreciate the time. So we know you have better things to do with your time, but certainly appreciate you helping everyone out. So.
Oh, you're welcome. It's pretty quiet right now. So.
Our next one.
Thank you to both of you guys.
I'm sorry, Alice, I stepped on you there, but our next rules webinar will be on. Is it on the 2nd? Is that?
I've got it right here.
Yeah, it's next Tuesday.
Okay, that's me. Okay, very good.
Clarky, you're up, and you're going to be doing the free relief procedures.
Okay.
Awesome.
This is going to help us with penalty relief on our last session, and also with Rule 20, I think.
Yeah, he's back. I think he's back from the horrible assignment he had in Hawaii. Or maybe he's on I know he's on this webinar. He texted me, so where are you? There he is. That smiling face.
Little sunburn there, Tom.
Well, I put the sunscreen on every day.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a tough gig, but somebody's got to do it, right, buddy?
Yeah. Somebody's got to do it. Great job, Alice. Great job, Clarky, for putting these together. And I think when you were talking about taping, I think, Matt, these are like last year. They're going to be taped, and you can go back and go over them again, can't you?
Correct.
Well, and I hope if I misspoke and misquoted a number or something, which I probably did, I wanted to say in the beginning that, Clarky, Tom, any of you guys Jeff could have jumped in and corrected me, because I don't mind being corrected, because usually I get rambling with these PowerPoints, and I at some point do misspeak. So hopefully the information is accurate.
You didn't do any misspeaking.
I did try to call it, started to say lateral water hazard, and I stopped myself.
Well, you owe $1. What are you going to do?
But the workshop, the virtual workshops with the USGA, I'm actually in the middle of my assignment each morning this week for 5 days in a row. And Alice, you mentioned that, and the feedback has been really good. The Vimeos that they have taped at Golf House are terrific. And Alice, you mentioned the nice part is you can go back and forth. You can stop it. You can watch it more than once. And it's great if you have insomnia, because you just put on one of those presentations and it'll help you go to sleep every night. But if you normally attend a rules workshop, while it's not the same being in person, I would certainly encourage you. Although we're doing a lot of these slide decks are exactly what they use for the Vimeos.
Yes.
So in many respects, the nice part is you can rewind and watch them more than once. And then there will be they're going to have the test. They're just like you mentioned, now they're working on the logistics of how to proctor it. So
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah, I think it's over. Didn't David say it's over 20 hours of videos on the Vimeo? Is that right? I haven't looked at them all yet. I'm trying to work through them all before I do anything in March, obviously. But I enjoy just hearing other people present, and I write a little note here and there, either in my book or in my binder, just to hear a different story or point of view or something that helps me remember a certain nuance.
That timing is about right. I know typically when you teach a workshop, you're looking at roughly 9 hours of speaking. So if you double that for each instructor, you're close to 20, 19, 20 hours of Vimeos. And then basically, like you mentioned, you go through a review of certain rules each day. And then, so it's an hour and a half. You probably spend 30 or 40 minutes on the review. And then all that rest of the time is for people to have a rules discussion, ask questions. And it's been working out really well. It's been very, very good, all things considered. Still plenty more you can sign up if you want to drink the rules Kool-Aid.
You want to go down that rabbit hole with us? Welcome to the club.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, everyone.
All right, guys and gals. We'll see you next time.
We'll see everybody soon on our next webinar. Appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys. Matt. Have a great day.